Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're diving headfirst into the terrifying beauty of world football's absolute scariest stadiums to figure out exactly what exists makes them so incredibly hostile. I mean, when the crowd is roaring, the stands are literally bouncing, and the flares are flying, there's just nothing scarier in sports than stepping into a raucous cauldron of noise. So let's break down the science, the deep history, and the intense culture behind these unbelievable environments. Okay, to really grasp this visceral terror, listen to this quote. "It doesn't shake, its heart beats." This is exactly how the devoted fans of Boca Juniors describe their legendary home down in Buenos Aires. It perfectly captures the terrifying physical power of these arenas. When a stadium feels like a living, breathing monster just waiting to swallow visiting players whole, you know for sure you're dealing with something way beyond a normal sports venue. So here's our roadmap for today. We're going to hit the architecture of intimidation, dive into historic derbies, unpack the real power of ultras, and finish up with a global tour of the loudest cauldrons of noise out there. All right, Section 1, the architecture of intimidation. Back in 1940, Slovenian architect Viktor Solčić had a literally massive problem. He was tasked with building a brand new stadium for Boca Juniors, but he had to somehow squeeze it into a tiny, crowded neighborhood space that was barely larger than a single city block. His solution? Just build straight up. He created these near-vertical stands sustained entirely by reinforced concrete. 3 of the stands are insanely steep, and 1 is practically a vertical wall. Unlike your standard sprawling stadiums with gradual slopes, La Bombonera forces the fans to be right on top of the opposition at all times. It creates this totally claustrophobic wall of sound. And the results of that vertical design? Well, former rival Hernan Crespo actually talked about how he physically felt the stadium swaying beneath his feet during a superclassical match. Because the pitch is the absolute minimum size allowed by FIFA, there's just nowhere to hide from the deafening noise. When tens of thousands of fans jump in unison, that massive concrete construction literally sways. For a first-time visitor, standing on a pitch that physically trembles under the weight of hostile fans has got to be a deeply unnerving experience. But, contrast all that matchday mayhem with this really beautiful observation from Italian author Alessandro Baricco. He highlighted how these intimidating cauldrons retain a very elegant mystique when they're silent. The actual imperfections of the stadium, like the steep pitches or that chopped-off flat side where local residents straight up refuse to sell their homes, they make it an architectural marvel. But a sleeping giant is, well, still a giant. It's just waiting to be woken up. Moving right along to Section 2, derbies and historic rivalries. Just let this number sink in for a second. 177,656. That is the official, mind-boggling attendance for the 1963 Flamengo versus Fluminense derby at the Maracanã in Rio de Janeiro. Almost 180,000 paying fans crammed into one stadium for a single club match. It remains the highest Fla-Flu attendance of all time. When a stadium is infused with that sheer volume of humanity, plus decades of bad blood, the atmosphere just becomes impossibly heavy for any visiting team. Let's map out how a legendary rivalry like Fla-Flu actually builds up that kind of insane atmosphere over the decades. This whole thing essentially kicked off in 1911 when unhappy Fluminense members split to form the football wing of Flamengo. Since their very first meeting in 1912, the derby has been an absolute cornerstone of Brazilian identity. Over the years, you get moments like Brazilian icon Zico scoring a record 19 Maracanã goals for Flamengo, or that incredible 1995 final where Renato Gaucho famously sealed the championship for Fluminense by somehow guiding the ball over the line with his stomach. Now, my absolute favorite piece of this lore has to be the Derby of the Lake. Picture this. It's 1941, and Flamengo is launching a devastating final assault to try and win the championship. Fluminense's players were struck by such intense fear and sheer panic under the pressure that they literally started kicking the match balls into the nearby Lagoa Rodrigo de Freitas just to waste time. Seriously, they kicked the reserve ball into the water, and when a waterlogged ball was retrieved by a passing rowing boat, they kicked that one in too. Fluminense won the league in bizarre circumstances, which just proves how the pure terror of a derby can completely alter the psychology of the players. Section 3. The power of ultras. It's super important we get our definition straight here. What are ultras, really? Often the media just stamps hooligan on them and calls it a day, but that totally misses the core sociology. Take a look at Marseille's Commando Ultra 84, which is France's longest-serving ultra group. In a city where unemployment is high and social issues are really prevalent, football offers this massive beacon of escapism. The ultras act like a family that stands for city unity. They're the ones orchestrating the massive flags, the incessant chanting, and the wild visual intimidation that makes the state velodrome so terrifying for opponents.
And you see that unity clash violently when Marseille plays Paris Saint-Germain. That rivalry isn't just about geography on a map, it's a literal class war. On one side, you've got the working class, multicultural, industrial port of Marseille. And on the other, the wealth, the style, and the elite status of the capital, Paris. So when these teams meet, it is a total clash of identities. This intense sociological divide boils straight over into the stands, leading to massive flares, deafening noise, and an atmosphere of pure, unfiltered hostility that visiting Parisian players have to somehow wade through. All right, Section 4, Global Cauldrons of Noise. First up on our global tour, we have Anfield in Liverpool. Now, it might not have a giant moat or a crazy, extreme vertical architecture, but stepping onto that pitch means facing the overwhelming weight of history. The home of the Reds since 1892, it is famous around the globe for its European nights. The sheer mystique of the club, soundtracked by that spine-tingling, unified chorus of You'll Never Walk Alone, well, it's enough to turn even the most experienced, world-class players into total nervous wrecks before the whistle even blows. Then you have Galatasaray's Türk Telekom Arena over in Istanbul. They famously used to greet visiting teams with massive banners that just said, "Welcome to hell." And man, the moniker absolutely stuck. What makes this stadium so terrifying is the blinding visual intimidation. The ultras literally set the stands ablaze with red and yellow flares, making the whole stadium look like an actual ring of fire. In fact, for over 2 years, this exact stadium held the official world record for the loudest atmosphere ever recorded in sports history. Crazy, right? Down in Naples, Napoli's Stadio San Paolo brings a totally different vibe. It is raw, it's unpolished. Unlike those ultra-modern, slick corporate stadiums, the San Paolo features bare concrete walkways and peeling walls. It gives this incredibly unnerving impression of an ancient Roman Colosseum. It really feels less like a modern sporting venue and much, much more like an ancient gladiatorial arena just waiting to swallow you whole, which perfectly matches the passionate intensity of the Neapolitan fans. Over in Egypt, the Cairo International Stadium scales that hostility up to a level that is genuinely hard to comprehend. Back in 1986, it packed in an African record of 120,000 fans. And even though it's been reduced to 75,000 seats today, it remains a totally febrile pauldron. As the home to both Al Ahly and Zamalek, their derby matches brew an animosity that is rarely matched anywhere else in the world. It creates a wall of tension you can practically cut with a knife. Of course, if we're talking about pure, awe-inspiring intimidation, we have to talk about Borussia Dortmund's Signal Iduna Park. Just imagine being a goalkeeper, looking up from your penalty box and seeing the yellow wall. This is Europe's largest freestanding grandstand, packing in 25,000 standing fans. It's basically a towering vertical cliff face of yellow scarves, massive choreographed banners, and organized, relentless noise raining down on the pitch for 90 minutes straight. There's really nothing else like it. Finally, there's the Rajko Mitić Stadium in Serbia, known locally as the Maracana. Now, Red Star Belgrade might not sell it out every single week these days, but when they do, say for a Champions League night or a massive derby against Partizan Belgrade, it completely transforms. The electric, roaring crowd proves that deeply historic stadiums can instantly become inescapable cauldrons of noise. They famously humble massive visiting European teams who naively underestimate the power of that local atmosphere. So what does this all mean? The big takeaway from our explainer today is that a truly intimidating stadium is never just one single thing. It is a perfect, terrifying storm. It's the cramped vertical concrete of La Bombonera, it's a century-old bad blood of the Fla-Flu Derby, and it's the organized, fierce passion of the ultras over in Marseille. Ultimately, these extreme environments are the literal beating hearts of their respective communities. But it leaves us with one provocative question as we wrap things up. If you had to step onto the pitch as a visiting player, which of these elements, the claustrophobic architecture, the suffocating history, or the roaring, fiery crowds, is actually the most terrifying? Think about that next time you tune in for a big match. Thanks for joining me.